The suspect went to the shed or the workshop and took the hammer and the axe from the workshop, leaving fingerprints on the workshop door. The suspect then went to the east room window and broke the window with the hammer and entered the house through the east room window. The suspect then went into the front room and found Mrs. and Mr. Smith sitting in front of the fire and hit Mr. Smith 2 times on the head, fatally killing him. Mr. Smith then fell back and the lower part of his body was swung into the fireplace and burnt. There was a blood pool left by Mr. Smith's head, which we identified as blood pool A. The suspect then went over to Mrs. Smith and hit her twice in the forehead, and after a bit of struggle, he hit her 2 more times with the axe, which killed her. The struggle between the perpetrator and Mrs. Smith created a blood pattern on the back wall of the front room, and Mrs. Smith's fatal wounds also created a blood pool which we identified as blood pool B. After killing the Smiths, the suspect then walked into the parlor where he dropped the hammer that was now covered in fingerprints and blood droplets. He then walked into the east room to find the money chest where he threw the axe he had used to murder the victims with out the window. Then he went down to the money chest and tried to get into the money chest, leaving fingerprints, blood droplets, and a hair strand on it. He then exited through the front door, leaving it open, as well as leaving blood drops on the front porch. This is a reenactment of the murder of the Smiths. This is not a video of the actual murder. So if you see someone move something or one of the actors move when they're supposed to be dead, they weren't supposed to do that. It's just what happened in the filming process. This is just a disclaimer for that. Thank you. Okay, Anton, this says interviewer. Okay, how do you know the Smiths? Hey, interviewer, this says Anton Geisler. I know the Smiths because I am their new farmhand. I'm also supposed to have a German accent, but I don't know how to do that, so. Hey, Anton, cool. New farmhand. Do you have any resentment towards the Smiths? Yeah, they didn't pay me for my month's work this month, so that was kind of boof. Have the Smiths ever shown any resentment towards you? Oh yeah, Mr. Smith used to mock me for not being able to speak English very good, so. Okay, Anton, what do you do for work? I am a farmhand. Anton, would you say that you wear the same pair of shoes often? Yeah, I'd say I wear the same pair of shoes pretty often. Do you speak English? I do not speak English, but for some reason in this interview, it sounds really good. Okay, Anton, what languages do you speak? I speak German. Anton, do you personally own any farm tools? The ones belonging to the Smiths are what I have access to. What were you doing before the Smiths were killed? I was living in Germany. I've only worked for them for a month. Anton, what were you doing the night of Sunday, November the 13th? Well, I was having tea with the Smiths and Henry Bauer, another farmhand that works for the Smiths. Anton, can anyone attest to your alibi, as in what you were doing after you left tea at the Smiths' house? No, not after I left tea. Alright, Anton, last question. Would you describe yourself as physically in shape, like myself? Yes, I would describe myself physically in shape. I'm young, I'm fit, right out of Germany, looking good. Thank you for interviewing me. Howdy, Anton. I am not the interviewer, I'm the interrogator. and I'm not nearly as nice as him either. I'm gonna tell you now that I've never had a perpetrator get away, so answer honestly. Alright, first question. Where were you? Answer honestly. After tea with the Smiths. Oh man, you're really intimidating. I was at my house. Yeah. Yeah, I was at my house. Doesn't sound too convincing. Whatever, next question. Do you know where the Smiths keep their money? Oh yeah, it's right in that room right by the window, in their money chest by the bed. Yeah, right there. Kind of peculiar, you know that. Moving on. Did you think you were ever going to get your money after your month's work? No, I really didn't think that they were going to give me my money. I thought that they had something against me because I was foreign and they just didn't like me. I didn't think I was going to get it. Interesting. So, if the Smiths were not murdered, how would you have gotten your money? I don't know. I probably would have, said something to Mr. Smith. Maybe. That one seemed a little bit more difficult to answer, didn't it, Anton? Why did you kill Mrs. Smith if she never made fun of you? Well, she was just as mean as Mr. Smith, but I didn't kill her. I'm just saying. She was just as mean. Hello, my name is Allison Keene, and I'm going to be the expert witness for the hair testimony. I am clearly very smart and have a lot of credentials, as you can tell by my glasses, and also by this certificate I got from analyzing hair. I have been analyzing hair at the forensic labs at the University of Oregon for 7 years, so if that doesn't sound good enough for you. I also have a master's degree in criminology with a focus on trace evidence, which includes hair, and I have solved over 100 cases using trace evidence and hair analysis, so I know what I'm talking about. Okay, so primarily we will be looking at the individual hair strands found at the crime scene, and we will discuss their location as well. So the first hair strand we found was the hair strand on the east room window. We then found another hair strand on the same window, but different hair sample. We then found a hair strand on the front room tea table. A hair strand on the front room floor. A hair strand on the front porch. And another hair strand on the front porch, but different sample. And a hair strand on the money chest. And another hair strand on the money chest. Now, the location of the evidence, the trace evidence that we found is extremely important, especially when it is hair, because it indicates a lot of what was happening and what type of person would be in the place that left the hair. So places like the front room and like on the tea table and stuff aren't as eye-catching to the forensic eye because that could have been left by anyone who's gone into the house. However, hair strands that were found on the east room window, which was broken into at the time of the murder, it's more intriguing, and we should look into it more. Okay, now I'm going to go through the control samples we took from the suspects and the victims after the murder. So the first control sample we have is of Anton Geisler's hair, and it looked like this. Next we have Alexander Smith, the victim, one of the victims. Rebecca Smith, another victim. right here. Henry Bauer, a farmhand, another suspect. Mary Ann Abbott, another suspect. She helped around the house. Francis Curran, the peddler. And finally, the dog, another sample from the dog. Now I will show you how we compared the hair found at the crime scene to the suspects and the victims' control samples of hair. The first hair sample we will be comparing is the control sample from Alexander Smith's head and the hair strand, one of the hair strands found on the money chest. These are the two compared side by side. They are comparable because they are both straight gray. The medulla pattern is fragmented and the medulla structure is absent, and the scale pattern is imbricate. Mr. Smith's hair sample also was comparable to the hair strand found on the East Room window because this hair strand was also straight gray, the medulla pattern was fragmented, the medulla structure was absent, and the scale pattern was also imbricate. Okay, now comparing Mrs. Smith's hair sample, we said it was comparable to the hair strand found on the front room tea table. These are them side by side. They were both curly gray, and the medulla pattern was absent as well as the medulla structure. And on both the sample found at the front room tea table and from Mrs. Smith were the scale pattern were both imbricate. Okay, the next control sample is from the suspect Henry Bauer, another farmhand. His hair sample was comparable to the hair strand found on the front porch. They were comparable because his sample and the sample found was both straight brown, the medulla pattern was continuous, the medulla structure was amorphous, and the scale pattern on both was imbricate. The next is from Anton Geisler, and his hair sample is comparable to the trace evidence found on the East Room window, and this is important because it is the place where the murderer broke into the Smith's house. And on both these samples, they were both straight blonde. The medulla pattern was continuous and the structure was amorphous, and on both the scale pattern is imbricate. The next suspect's control sample was comparable to the hair strand on the front room floor, and the sample was belonging to Mary Ann Abbott. These are the two compared. Both are curly and brown in color, and the medulla pattern was intermittent and the medulla structure was absent, and the scale pattern on both is imbricate. Another suspect's hair sample, Francis Curran, was comparable to the another hair strand found on the front porch. They were both black in color and curly. The medulla pattern was continuous and the medulla structure is amorphous, and on both it is imbricate, so that is why they are comparable. And the last one was found on the money chest, and the control that is most comparable to it is sampled from the dog, the Smith's dog. This one is the most distinct because the scale pattern is different from the rest, which makes it from an animal. So on this one, it was straight, both are straight brown, medulla pattern is fragmented, medulla structure is amorphous, and the scale pattern is spinous. The most important trace evidence of hair that was found was the one found on the East Room window that was not comparable to Mr. Smith's. The one that was comparable to Anton Geisler's, which was this one. And this one was so important because it was the only place where a hair sample was found where another one of their guests couldn't have really left it. So that is what makes us believe that Anton is the one who murdered the Smiths.